Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Gentleman Standard. I'm Yor-El Francis,
And I'm Cecil Burrowes.
and today's episode is called The Weight. This topic is about what we perceived as strong people or strong men. Behind every strong man that people perceive as strong, we usually don't see the weight that person's carrying. And the question sometimes isn't whether they're carrying the weight, it's whether or not, or it's actually what that weight is doing to that person. And so that's where we begin our conversation, the weight.
Yeah, and I'll say this, if you're in any position of responsibility, ownership, and we'll go in the professional realm, but we'll also talk personally as well. I would say this conversation is really for you. The last topic we had, which was the drift and getting comfortable and how you start eroding certain elements of you, it's this is all about the weights that you're carrying and what starts leading you to get into drifts from that standpoint as well. So when we started talking about the weight as a topic, um, thinking about my career, there's I consider there being a difference between the weight, and you brought up the point around weakness, right? I think there's a difference between the weight and the weakness. The way I put it is the weight is what leadership actually costs. There is a cost to bear being in leadership. The weakness is pretending it doesn't cost anything. It doesn't cost anything, right? Mentors and those that I've respected, I've gotten advice from over my career weren't the ones that had no weight. They were the ones who really learned how to carry it without bending to them. And the bending to them element is where we talked about the drift component,
Mm.
right? And the question on this is how do you let me put this question to you. How would you define weight in the industry in which you're tied to?
Well, for me, weight is clearly it's leadership, and it's those quiet moments and those decisions that need to be made, those hard decisions that need to be made, but nobody sees you making, that carry a lot of consequences. And as someone who's been around people who have done that, and as somebody who does that, um, it can be polarizing. It can be isolating. It can put you in a position where people are sometimes afraid to talk to you because you are, in this bracket, and you make decisions that affect them. And so the camaraderie that maybe you once had sort of dissipates in a way. But it comes with leadership, and it's part of the weight that we have to carry. Um, and it doesn't always have to be that way, but more often than not, it is. You know what I mean?
Well, it's a question I've been wanting to ask you when we got to this topic. You being in entertainment industry, so many thoughts people have, because it's the sexiest place to be. I mean, quite frankly, okay. When I say I'm in corporate, people are like, oh yeah, great. Doesn't necessarily come off as an industry everybody's running towards from that standpoint. You don't as a 10-year-old go, hey, I want to get into corporate and home office and run spreadsheets and initiatives like that. I'd love to get into sports and entertainment and things along those lines. You actually sit in that seat. So people think of the creative side of it, but on a film set, what does the weight actually look like for you as a director?
So you're the leader on set. You're responsible for, let's say, between 300 and 500 human beings. Uh, you set the tone. People listen to your every word. You set the pace. People follow your momentum. You set the mood. People follow your vibe. And so
Mm.
that is something that sometimes people who are leaders on set aren't cognizant of
Hmm.
and sometimes fall short. And, sometimes people don't recognize that that's the weight or the responsibility that you carry. Um, your mission as a director, as somebody who drives the set, is to achieve the day, whatever you've put on paper for the day. And so you are negotiating, talking, working with all the cast, the crew, uh, making sure that everyone is, responsible for their job, and answering questions that people will have all day long. Because guess what? You're the buck stops with you. And so it's glamorous on the outside, but it's serious one on one, one on 12, one on whatever business all day long. And by me, what I mean by you set the tone and you set the vibe, how you handle that sets the expectation and the course for the rest of the people who are working with you. Because if you're handling it by burying your head in the sand and not talking to anybody, you're setting yourself up for just pure destruction. And for me, that's the weight. And the interesting thing about weight or the weight is I feel that it doesn't have to be burdensome. I feel that you can still carry a weight, but you can make it meaningful. And I think it's your approach to leadership. And for me, my approach to leadership isn't one where it's just like, oh, I'm carrying all this on my shoulders. It's we're a team and let's execute this and let's tackle this and we're going to have fun doing this. And if there are problems, we'll overcome them. And if there are obstacles, we're going to blow right through them. And if we can't, we'll find a way around them. And that's just been the approach that I've learned as I've watched others in my journey to where I am.
That's awesome perspective, and thank you for sharing that because a lot of folks really want to understand what goes on in your chair in the entertainment space. It's the weight for me, as I was thinking about this topic, that really puts it in perspective. Uh, you can get going from personal to professional. Just on the personal side, showing up as a father, um, knowing that every and any all decisions I make that looks to provide for the family that I'm a part of, family unit I'm a part of,
Hmm.
each and every day as I wake up to when I go to sleep. That is a major cross to bear,
It is.
especially if you're one of the ones that's being relied upon to continue to make that happen. Um, and any and all father or husbands that are part of this process, or even if you're managing your entire household or you're managing your family, there are a lot of us that are caring for our parents at this point, at this stage in our lives, and making sure that we're there for them, our siblings that we're attached to. The weight that comes along with that, a lot of people don't see the burden that you carry, positive or negative. In some instances, I love your perspective on it isn't always burdensome, right? It is sometimes recognizing, hey, I'm a significant component of somebody's life and
Hmm.
I have to handle in that way. And when we talk about standards that need to be set, how are you willing to be perceived by those individuals that you touch? So I love that you put it that way. To bring it home to folks, especially those that are entering into their careers, here's a thing you're going to need to think about. And this is the decision you have to make on how you want to show up, right? A lot of folks that are entering into the in my industry in the corporate environment, you want to lead. That's just a part of the natural growth of your profession and your career. You want to be able to say, I've run a team, I've managed others, I've done so well that people want to see me grow others in our organization. That is usually the tip top pinnacle that company says, listen, we value you so much. We want you to repeat that process with others, show them the light, help them figure out their North Star to grow their career. The weight of that comes in play, and what you need to be prepared for, and why you need to establish really, really strong standards, is that at some point in time, it becomes so real to you that you have somebody's careers in your hand,
Hmm.
right? It plays itself out in this way. You inevitably are going to have some really, really great performers that you're going to the weight of how you manage and the things that you do. You're going to be able to be there to champion them, move them to the next level, potentially help them grow in their careers, become a peer, working through with that, and the respect that you provided is received so well, and that they value you so much in your opinion. You've been that good. Your standards were so high that they rely on you, right? And it shows up. And when they leave you and they leave your organization, and they come back and engage with you, that says something about the weight that you carry and how you leverage that. But it's also in instances when you have to have somebody on a performance improvement plan, or you can't give them the promotion that they so rightly in their mind think they deserve, or the compensation that comes along with that. That is your everyday. And leading up to those sessions and those conversations you have to have, if you do not have the wherewithal, the internal standards that are established, if you haven't cared for ways that you aren't showing up in an effective manner, you don't trust yourself effectively, and you're not showing up in the ways that you expect yourself to show up, that weight hits you like a ton of bricks, because you haven't prepared for how the weight is being exercised in your day to day. That is one of the biggest ways in your professional career that weight shows up, is
Hmm.
how you manage the folks whose careers are in your hand, because that's what you're driving towards, you're striving towards. And unfortunately, we get to a point, and if you're not carrying that weight effectively, that you can ruin careers. For me, that was my wake up call around the weight and respect that I have to give to the way that I show up, and it ensured that I consistently did all the necessary things to truly be a leader, which is not, people, there are people that say you're born a leader and all of that. A lot of leaders are practiced. A lot of leaders have a lot of things that they need to do to build themselves up to be an effective manager and leader. And that's learning and conversations and asking for feedback, receiving feedback, and course correcting. You got to learn that really well before you can have an impact on others. And the weight and the respect of the weight that you have to carry, trust me, if you do it the right way, will show up very, very well for those that you manage, but it'll also show up really, really well in your personal life as well. You can master that in a professional setting. You can master it in a personal setting. And by the by, it's inverse. If you can do that in a personal setting, you absolutely can do that in a professional setting, and the learnings that are there. But that's how, for me, it shows up, quite frankly.
And do you think that the weight is factored into leadership burnout?
So one of the things when we were going into this topic, right? So, we do a lot, a peek behind the curtain. We do a lot of research on these topics to kind of get a sense of what we're talking about, and what's happening within our different industries, et cetera. One of the things I saw that was really interesting is 36% more likely, their managers are 36% more likely to burn out than the people they manage. So when you talk about leadership burnout, US employees burnout hit rates are at an all-time high of 66% in 2025. There's a lot going on, right? There's a lot going on that we're dealing with. And the weight of leadership, this tells you that the weight of leadership is not in our heads. It is a real thing. 36% more most likely to burn out, and hitting an all-time high of 66% in 2025 tells you there is leadership burnout, to answer your question directly.
Yeah, and I think that from my perspective, what I've seen, uh, or how I've seen burnout happen is when people choose to just carry their weight and leadership silently. And I've learned that for me is not the course, because I think that that's an easy recipe for veering your ship into the cliff, or, off the cliff or into a rock. I think that as a leader, you for sure need sounding boards. You for sure need to bounce ideas off of other leaders, people in your team, people at home. It's like it's I find, not worth it to just carry it on your own shoulders. Because I think that's when, at least in my experience, it just creeps into your entire being. And you kind of then lose your axis and your focus. And that, veers you off course. So yeah, that's how I feel about, carrying it silently. I don't think you should. I think you should put a voice to the
To
weight. You should put a
that
voice
that's
to the burden as opposed to just carrying it.
great point. You almost have to ask yourself, right? And how this resonates with me. You have to ask yourself, if you put a voice to it, why are we so afraid to put a voice to it? Is what I'm trying to say. Do we feel like if we put a voice to it, it'll seem as though we weren't built to handle it? I'll be honest with you. That's how I functioned and operated. When I would carry certain situations and the weight was just so much, and where I'm getting headaches and sweats, and you're up late trying to make some things happen in your responsibilities from a professional based perspective, you would the perception was you carried that burden on your own. It is a part of why you were hired and you were placed in that role, and you were just to shut up and perform. You came, you carried it, you performed, right? And there was always a thought that me articulating that I'm dealing with some really heavy shit, quite frankly, um, me articulating that would cost me something,
Hmm.
cost me points. And so your point around the silent carrying it around silently is why I think a lot of executives still today, people that I dealt with, partners, peers, people I respect, mentors, deal with it in that way because it's like yeah, you're supposed to do. That's why what's a common phrase? That's why you're paid the big bucks. No, carrying this weight in instances consistently where it's just completely breaking you down, to where you're protecting others, is a rationalization that we generally tend to use, which in some instances allows things to blow up in ways that we never intended it to. There's no actual cost to articulating, hey, I'm dealing with some really weighty stuff and I need some help here, right? This is something we need to ask ourselves by articulating the weight that we carry. What are we actually losing?
Exactly.
Like,
For
take a
for
beat and ask yourself that question.
for me, I think that that approach is what I would term extremely old school. Because it's like that's not the world we live in today. And it's okay to get emotional support.
Hmm.
It's okay to want to talk about things. It's not soft to want to unburden yourself to someone, maybe a professional, uh, about the weight you're carrying. And I think that
I
that
think
is something that people just play games with themselves about and buy into that old school notion
that's
of
actually
you have to just carry everything on your shoulders.
so you nailed a great point. Yours so you're something that really had me stop in my tracks, right? Um, Research shows that 1 in 4 men say they have no close friends. And of the men who do have some type of support, most of them are leaning in almost entirely on one person, usually their spouse, in some who gets to hear it all. Has to be our therapist, has to be, our cheerleader, our sounding board, our course corrector. And
Don't
only
we know it?
17%, don't we know, right? And only 17% of American men saw, meant to your point, a therapist in 2023. So we're being asked. So here's the deal, right? This great opportunity in this great career. We're being asked to carry an enormous burden and weight with essentially no infrastructure, right? Uh, Even if you're running off the rails and it's making you frazzle, There's no space for personal failure or discussing and not acknowledging there's some type of design of failure element built into this. So you're just supposed to carry it, shut up, lean in, because that's why you get paid the big bucks. Um, the challenge with that, and I bring this all back to what we're talking about, which is really your brand and how you build that, and you protect it, is when you've done all the necessary work to build yourself up, building the foundation, ensuring that you're showing up the right way, ensuring that you've grounded yourself to where you eliminate the feel of being a imposter in rooms.
Mhm.
You have a strong strategy to show up effectively. You're now establishing a leadership element and you being trusted and adding value, that the expectation is, because you've done all of that, shut up and carry the weight. Shut up and don't deal with it. I'm sorry. Don't pull others into that conversation. If you got somebody to talk about it to your spouse, maybe, or a pillow. From that standpoint, that is not what is expected. And quite frankly, that's not what you're truly successful do within our space. And being a gentleman, the expectation is we built ourselves enough to understand where we have failings and gaps, and we're able to articulate that in a way that's helpful, not only to ourselves, but those who are in our circle. In my humble opinion, I don't have a problem. And mind you, I have built myself to this point. So I don't begrudge anybody who's struggling with getting to the space. I was there, right? I was quiet and dealt with it in many instances, and it in some instances it fried me out of roles, into something else, because it was like I just can't continue to do this to myself, to my family, etc. When I could have been steps ahead of my what I deemed as successful in my career if I'd have gone down that path. But I wasn't willing to discuss the weight that I was carrying, which would have brought insights for me in different ways, and individuals that I trusted, or feedback that I could have received that could have helped me carry that in a more effective manner. I just dealt with it on my own until it almost broke me. And then I said, okay, let me course correct and find another opportunity, another lane. Luckily, I landed well, but that doesn't always happen for everybody. That's not a good process to go down. And it's a fatal flaw learning that I had. I should have stuck with it, but I should have asked for help and feedback.
We
There's no shame in that.
None, which leads me to it. We're talking about it's important to have emotional support, and in the same vein, people to lean on. And it's, we talked about leaning on, your spouse. For me, I lean heavily on my spouse. I lean heavily on my mother, and some close personal friends who I can call and just, seek their guidance, mentors as well. Um, and for me, that's the circle. And it's been enough for me to be able to navigate and bounce thoughts and ideas off of, to, just keep my focus on moving forward. Um, and and sometimes, we shy away from leaning on people. Um, and again, it's not a sign of weakness to
It's not.
to lean on someone. To like they say, it takes a village, and that's okay, because you need to have your tribe, your village around you to lift you up. Um, when I was growing up in Liberia, there used to be a thing called the Hold Up Hands Society, which was run by a woman called Karina Van E. And their purpose was to just be a support group. And that it wasn't there wasn't anything like stated or underwritten, but that was their purpose. So in times of crisis within certain families, they'd be there to hold up their hands. And I think it's such a beautiful thing. It's a communal thing, and you have to be open. That's the flip side, and receptive to somebody extending their hand to hold you up as well, as a leader. And that's part of carrying the weight.
The the who do you reach out to do you find when your usual go-tos are not available?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
That's a tough one. Um, I kind of wait it out.
Wait it out.
I kind of
I
wait it
like that.
out
Uh-huh.
uh, and until they can make time uh, because trust is important, and it's hard to just open up to just anyone. And so your usual go-tos are people you value and are people you trust. And for me, I think it's important to protect that space and to protect your trust. And so I would wait it out, um, and till a slot becomes available.
It's that's a way to do it. From that standpoint, I like that.
How do
The
you handle it?
so the challenge for me is knowing who to go to.
Mm,
Um, right, from that standpoint, I have I went through a leadership training years and years and years ago. One of the cool things about being in the banking industry is there's a lot of really great training programs that you're afforded to learn more about yourself, learn from a career-based perspective, et cetera. And there was one as an African American leader, Black African American leadership program that I had the benefit of one of my leaders saying, "Hey, we see you as bench strength for our leadership team, and there are certain things that we're going to invest in you. You need to attend this and learn a little bit more about what it takes to be a leader, an African American leader, no less, in this environment," which is really cool to go through that process. And what I learned from a doctor, and Robin is her first name. I'm forgetting her last name, which is this was in San Francisco. She had a book called The Dance of Leadership, and one of the elements in that book was tied into networking. And what became very clear to me at that time is an important thing in the corporate environment is building a network. They talk about that, really curating a strong network, right? And it's a close circle of individuals that you can go to and ask questions and get real feedback. I have some certain individuals in my life that have been here throughout my career: George Swaggart, Bob Marshall. I'm going to give there's a lot of names that were my go-to trusted confidants that, would give me real feedback about myself, that wake me up in some instances, and talk me off of ledges. Stephen Dunbar, who's a cousin of mine, um, has been in this industry forever. The folks that I can go to and rely on, where my inner circles are like, I can call them at drop of a hat and they're going to give me the real.
mhm,
But what was interesting about what Robin and her team shared is, listen, you've got to have sub networks that you would go to. And I hadn't thought about that, right? I thought about this group of leaders, and it has to be leaders, executives that have strong presence and all this, inspired by. And what I realized is, okay, that's good for one portion of the thing that you're going to need help and feedback on. What about this other group that can tell you on some things from a peer level perspective, what they're going through, so you can help understand as well as not just listen? Where are you giving back, right? So I started weaponizing for my ultimate goals, my network, right? I started building sub networks from that standpoint. So the reason I did that and the learning and the benefit I gave is I hardly ever have someone I can't reach out to with a question that's really eating at me,
mm.
right? And that's on the professional side, and then on the personal side, there's 8,000 people we can reach out to. They aren't always going to give you the right answer on what you're looking for, but they're individuals you can call and have a question with. I did the work, so I usually don't have that gap. When they're not available, there's usually two or three that I know I can reach out to rather quickly. They're going to respond. The challenge for me on this question, though, isn't whether they're available, is what happens when you're the person they're calling, someone's calling to unload that weight.
Mhm.
And the weight that you're experiencing is, what do you say in instances when you know more than you can articulate back to them? If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think that when you're on the other end, I try to just listen.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, and sometimes that's all someone needs. they don't necessarily need you to opine about what you think about what they're going through. So if you feel like you may not have the answer or the answer might be too much, sometimes I just listen. And then other times I feel like leadership is not compartmentalized. Uh, it's it's a part of the whole. If if I'm trying to be clear, and I think that sometimes in our quest, we think that it's just this piece that needs to be fixed, but we are not looking at the whole. And I think that in those
That
conversations,
in those con-
um, whether it's you on the receiving end or vice versa, that's an important piece of the puzzle because I've seen people not recognizing their whole, uh, and then a consequence of that is them breaking. And so for me, it's very important to understand that all your pieces make the complete you, and that just one piece is not all of you. And I think in this world, fast-paced world that we're in, I think it's so easy to lose track of that. And I think that's how you go off the deep end, and that's how some people just, you know, break.
so let me ask you this question to that point. Um, I think it'll be interesting to the audience as it relates to the entertainment industry. Directing, um, in my humble opinion, is a version of weight, right? Um, that we never see as audience members. The finished product, the movie, the video, the music, the all the things that you've dealt with within that space. It we don't make those connections. What are you actually carrying around on set that doesn't show up in the credits when it comes to weight as a director?
Yeah. So you're carrying around, an actor being 5 hours late, who's pivotal to the entire movie, and then that pushes everything else up, and then that equals people are sitting around doing nothing who are getting paid, and that pushes up your post-production time frame because you have to deliver the movie on a schedule, and this 5 hours could put you off by a day because 5 hours is a lifetime in the movie making world. um, and you're not seeing the frantic stress of having to sit down with the assistant directors to figure out what can we do in the 5 hours that we're waiting for them to show up that could help buy us some time, and then coming up with there's actually nothing because he's in everything. And so that's one thing. um, the other thing is watching somebody just fizzle out in their role on set as a director or in a leadership role and just completely losing their focus, balance, whatever you want to call it. And then watching how that offsets on the rest of the crew and people's fears and vulnerabilities, whatever, all just trickle up. And it's all because of, one person who's probably insecure and is taking that and has now just skewed the entire day for everybody.
Hmm.
And you don't see that in the credits. You don't see that on screen.
Yeah.
But those are some things that can happen.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that, man. The I could see when you were talking about watching somebody break, I could see that being something that could break that could break somebody from a weight-based perspective.
it's not for the weak. You're there and you are driving the engine. Uh, you're the steam, you're the nuclear power, you're the gas, you're like whatever that is that needs to go, you're the one. And people feed off of your energy. And you've got to push. Otherwise, you know, pop goes the weasel.
The one thing I'll say is, and I'm, over 30 plus years, there have been instances where I've had folks, and I appreciate that they trusted me in these instances to break in front of me. Um, Closed door, hey, can I talk to you for a second? Come in, close the door, and just literally unload to where, tears are coming down because they've hit the walls crushed them. And those I value, those intimate settings where people need a space to correct themselves, right? Around, I just need somebody to hear me out. Um, I've had those happen more times than I can count. Uh, that's I don't want to make it seem like it was in the double digit segments, but more than I would have anticipated. But that speaks to, for those that are listening to us, that speaks to when people trust you in that way. That speaks to how you've handled yourself. I hope you respect and appreciate the fact that people see you in that way. So I appreciate the fact that people trusted me in that truly, truly personal setting to come and do that. Where I caution us is allowing yourself to deal so much with the weight that it breaks you in public settings. And while it can happen, and you have that freedom to do that, and you have that, in today's setting, some folks will be like, "Hey, you should be able to be yourself and show everybody who you are." And in a meeting, if you're ready to just lose it, right? Let them deal with it, who you are, and seeing that. The feedback I give on that, and the thing I want you to think about is when dealing with the weight and you've suffered in silence and you've finally allowed it to crush you. And I'm going to have everybody in this room understand the pain I'm going through, because that's usually how this is going to show up in that way when you see somebody break, is you have done such an amazing job getting yourself to be seen as a valuable asset to whatever line of business that you're in, a respected asset, somebody that individuals have to have around to get things done. You've done an amazing job in your command. You've done an amazing job in how you show up in your presence. You've done an amazing job uh, building yourself up to show up in a way that's respected, to where you allow the weight to just break all of that down, because it takes a while to come back from that. What I would suggest in many instances is build up your network, your inner circle, or what have you. Hopefully, the thing that resonates is you got to find some people you trust to where you can have that closed door session and let them be with you to break, and can help give you feedback and insight, or just listen, right? Or just be there with you, um, because you will feel so much better that you can have that one-on-one engagement. Hopefully, in some instances, you have a strong enough relationship with your leader to be able to have that kind of conversation, because we feel so much that we lose. We talked about this earlier. We lose points with people
Mm.
if we allow them to see the fact that the weight is getting to you. You've got to build up that circle that can have your back when those happen, because if you allow the entire public to see you break, you have to do so much more to get yourself back into that valued asset and resource. So my feedback to you is you've got to really have your game strong in the sense of where you've built yourself up internally. We talked about this before. You build your inner standards so much that it can't help but to show up in public. Imagine overnight cutting that in half because you allowed the weight to break you in public. And having that weight go unchecked, it can eventually break you in public. And in some instances, I wouldn't say it's a career killer per se, but it is definitely a detractor to some, because let's be honest, when you're in any industry, there are folks that are on the upper climb and you're but a rung on that, right? So watch your game, watch how you deal with the weight, and figure out a way to have a support system that can help you as you break. And it doesn't even have to be just in the office. You can have a group that you deal with. I have an amazing group of gentlemen that I deal with here that we get to sit around and we talk about everything. We debate, and it's a trusted group. We debate politics, religion, sex, marriage, everything, and we talk it out. And I get a lot of my sanity from this group of trusted gentlemen that I deal with that ground me, and they look for me to help ground them. And because of that, the weight doesn't get too much, and it doesn't become too much for me to carry. And it's helped me professionally and personally, quite frankly. Find that. You're going to need that in your career as you grow because the weight doesn't change, it just gets heavier.
I want to talk about trust and crisis in leadership. And I want to go back to my days as a student. Back in college, I went to Hunter College in Manhattan and I was a student leader. And when I was there, it was a turbulent time. We were always organizing, always protesting, always occupying a building to force the administration to address issues that we believed mattered. Tensions were always high, emotions were high, people were passionate. And one day we took over a building and we shut the escalator down. And, we had our banners and everything. And I noticed one of the deans who we were protesting against, who in less turbulent times we would, as a leader, communicate on a daily basis. She was walking up to the escalator and I stopped her. Um, and again, we weren't on the same side, we were on opposite sides. But in my mind, I understood that her getting on the escalator equaled danger, and equaled us not getting our voices heard. Because what was the point of hurting a dean? That just would just exacerbate the whole situation. So we wanted change. We didn't want, at least I didn't want hurting someone wasn't the mission. So I stopped her and I suggested to her to take another route. Don't go up this way. And she gave me this strange look. And she nodded, turned her head, and walked away. Um, but that moment afterwards, because we talked about it afterwards, taught me a lesson. Um, I had already risen to the occasion. Leadership isn't about just protecting the people who you're on the same side with.
Mhm.
Uh, Leadership
That's
is about protecting people. I was a student leader, and in that moment, I understood that her getting hurt by our protest was not in anyone's interest. Um, and negotiating a way for her to exit, but still maintaining our shutdown was the strategy. And I think that, you know, in this world, it's important that even with people you disagree with, people who stand in opposition with you, you don't always have to cut their heads off
sure.
in order to get the point through.
Yeah.
And again, I was in college, and that was for me a very strong lesson on leadership, the burden of leadership, because I could have sat there and thought my fellow students are going to see me as A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And I didn't really think about that. I just thought about this is what should happen in this moment. It doesn't detract from me being a leader, me being a voice for what I am, what we are fighting for, or any of those things. It just means this is the right thing to do at this point in time.
That that is that is it's interesting because the more things change, the more things stay the same, right? So one of the other things that threw me for a loop when we were thinking about the weight, and you specifically went there with leadership, is when we were looking at some stats, and it said that trust in immediate managers dropped from 46% to 29% in just 2 years, 2022 to 2024. So you're dealing with way back then, and I'm not trying to date us when we say way back then.
Okay.
Don't take way back then that way.
We look good.
So,
That's all that
we're
matters.
still aging like
So,
flying wine, but
exactly.
things haven't
Look at our
changed.
parents.
Look at it, right? But things haven't changed though, to the point you're making. And the other thing about this that was surprising, because it's not just a um us dealing with our leaders and not trusting, but it's also leaders being so stressed out. 40% of stressed leaders have considered leaving their leadership roles entirely. And this is today, within these times, from that standpoint. And it was based off some surveys that were done. And this is just basically experienced people who've hit a wall because the weight's becoming unsustainable with everything that you're dealing with in the office, and then everything you're dealing with at home, and everything you're dealing in the news. Um, there's a lot of people thinking about taking a step back because it's a crisis. It's not a weakness issue; it's a weight issue, from that
Hmm.
standpoint. And the question is, what processes have you stood up to help you deal with the weight that comes along with being a leader, and to tie it back to what we're talking about, to being a gentleman, right? And having set standards that you refuse to let erode, so that it keeps you going and building towards your ultimate goal, from that standpoint. It's interesting.
Yeah, and exactly. And illustrating my point, if I didn't have standards, I wouldn't have pivoted
Pivoted.
in the manner that I did. Um, the thought is anybody can lead when everybody agrees. Anybody can carry responsibility when it's convenient. Um, the test comes when you're responsible for things or people or matters that you don't support, and people that don't agree with you. And I think that's the crisis that's going on now because everyone's in disagreement, but no one knows how to carry that disagreement to a place of understanding the other side and then moving forward. And that's, unfortunately where we are. For me, it's comes down to character. And that's it in a nutshell. So, it's as simple as that.
So you being in the field that you're in, I know you've got a lot of people that probably reach out to you for advice. A lot of individuals just entering into the industry, um, who are asking you for feedback, right? My question to you is, taking into consideration the element of weight that comes along with their responsibilities and what they're going to have to deal with, how do you better or best prepare people? Or I always, the way I always situate this question, is it better to have a person put their hand on the stove or tell them that the stove is hot? From that standpoint. So when people are reaching out to you for advice, how do you approach it to prepare them for the weight?
I think that the first part of whatever conversation we have would be how bad do you want it? So I guess it's putting your hand on the
Mm,
stove.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I guess I'm a put your hand on the stove kind
Gotcha.
of guy. And then we'll just work ourselves backwards from
Okay.
there. Because it starts with the drive. And then that carries you
Mhm.
forward. So how bad do you want it? And then we go from
It's
there.
funny. I'm in the same camp, right? So when folks reach out to me for advice, and um, the number one thing I do a lot of talks, on I was doing a lot on college campuses, and I was doing some things around with student athletes around name, image, and likeness, for my prior company, and we were talking about being financially aware, financial education, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And one thing I always told the youth when I meet with them is, I am extremely jealous of you. And they're looking at me like, who's this guy? What is he talking about? And I said, you have something that I don't have right now. You have time. You have time on your side. Um, you're in organized walls with individuals who are here with a lot of insight. The question is, how are you going to use your time? And I use that with new professionals that come up and reach out to me because I didn't think to do that when I was getting into the business. For some reason, I one of my skills you have, a lot of us have, and I think it's from our family upbringing, the blueprint that we talked about before, our DNA, is it's going to be really hard for you to out people us. We do really, really well on working with people. And so for some reason, I gradually get individuals in my corner. It's a skill, right? It's a strategy, and then I also have my inner workings around how I tackle that. But what I wasn't really, really good at, and luckily I had that happening because I wasn't really, really good at recognizing where I was and reaching out to individuals and asking questions. Hey, I'd love to connect with you on my career. I'm really interested in going down this path. Can I bend your ear and talk a little bit about what got you here? I didn't do a lot of that early in my career. So I always love, and for folks that are looking for advice and feedback, there are a lot of professionals that you deal with that are waiting for you to ask them questions, right? But you got to be ready to receive the responses. So I am the same with you. I'm a hand on the stove kind of guy. I'm like, how bad do you want this? Because here's what's involved. I'm going to tell you everything that's built up my career. Here are the things that worked. Here's the things that didn't work. Here's the learnings I had. Here's the opportunities that I didn't take advantage of that I should have. Here's the regrets that I have. But you have time in front of you. And I'm really happy that you did this, that you reached out to me to have this conversation. But my question to them is, I hope you didn't waste my time having this conversation with you because I'm trying not to waste your time. So, what are you going to do with the feedback I gave you? And we talk about that. So, I've had mentees of mine that have been with me throughout their professional career. You know, you usually are mentee mentor relationships go over a year or two, what have you. I've had folks with me for 20 plus years where we've just been connecting because it turns into a peer and it turns into a friend situation, especially those that you know are really taking your words to heart and doing something about it, right? And you're investing in them, your time and energy and effort. I try to make sure people are aware of what's in front of them and what they're going to deal with and the rooms that they're in. And is if I have a female mentee, here's some things that you're going to expect, you're going to probably see and be ready for. Like, how are you preparing for it? If you're a minority executive that we're dealing with, listen, let's be real about what you're going to experience from that standpoint. If you're a white male executive that's coming to me for advice from this standpoint, here's some of the challenges you're going to experience from this standpoint today that are obstacles and hurdles in front of you from that standpoint on what you're expected to learn and know, where others are casting aspersions on you, thinking that you're ahead of the game when you're like, what the hell are you talking about? No, I'm not from that standpoint. So you've got to make sure you're real with individuals around what you've gone through and some things that you've seen from your seat and your perspective, and also let them know they've got to keep asking those questions of others from that standpoint. But you're the brakes along the way. And by the by, as things, as the weight amasses, you've got to have a strategy on how to deal with that because if not, it will break you. It will absolutely break you. And talking about that and being real with them around what I've experienced when the weight tried to do that to me from that standpoint.
I I feel like the weight is a heavy subject. I think we all need to revisit
We will
this.
we will have to. Yeah,
So that brings us to the close of this episode, and we hope that you enjoy the subject and stay tuned for our next podcast.
absolutely. Great convo, great connecting. Y'all have a great day.
Take care, guys.